My name is Matt Alt, and I am crazy about Japanese robots. Actually, more specifically, I'm crazy about Japanese robot toys, which I've been collecting ever since I've been a little kid. This is my collection. Take a look. This right here is Machinder Z. He is the very, very first Jumbo Machinder toy that was ever sold in 1973 in Japan. Now this toy created such a sensation that it started off a huge fad for robot toys that really hasn't stopped in Japan even to this very day. So let's take a look at what is a Jumbo Machinder. First of all, they're made of hollow plastic, a kind of plastic called polyethylene. If you flick it, it's very hard. It's the same type of material they use to make shampoo bottles. Another characteristic of Jumbo Machinders is they shoot little missiles, just like this. This is a classic Popey Jumbo Machinder missile. Popey is the company that actually made the first one of these toys. When it became very popular in 1973, a lot of other companies started making them as well. And now there's dozens and dozens of them. Some people think there's as many as 70 or 80, but nobody's really sure. Let's take a look at some. This toy actually isn't a robot. You might be familiar with him. His name's Godzilla. He's a giant monster that attacks Tokyo in all sorts of Japanese movies. Now this guy is interesting because he's got a talking mechanism. If you pull this string right here, he'll talk. Unfortunately, it's kind of old, so it doesn't sound very good, but here we go. I think if this were new, he would probably sound like he's roaring, but right now, unfortunately, he just sounds like he's squeaking, but he's still one of my favorites. This guy here is a little shorter than the average size. Most Jumbo Machinders are 24 inches tall, that's 2 feet. This guy is only about, I'd say 18 inches tall, 1.5 feet, but he's still considered a Jumbo Machinder because he's made out of this polyethylene material. Also, he's got the missile launchers, which is a big thing, even though this guy doesn't have any missiles on him right now. His name is Big Die X. He's called that because of this X-shaped accoutrement he's got stuck right in the middle of his face. This wasn't from an animated show, but rather a live-action series that debuted early 1980s. This guy here is named Aura Battler Dunbine, and he was the star of a show of the exact same name. And this toy is quite interesting because, as you can see here, it's one of the few Jumbo toys that actually has a pilot. He's got an action figure that sits in there. And what we can do is, we can pull this, you can actually take him out. There he is. That's the guy who drives this giant robot. Now in this particular animated series, these aren't exactly robots, they're kind of insects that are melded together with robot mechanical parts. People use them to fight battles with one another. Now these three guys all go together. They're from a series called Geta Robo G. And this series aired in Japan in 1976. And it was actually the sequel to another show that had a similar title. It was called just Geta Robo, but this is Geta Robo G. Now all three of these robots actually represent the exact same machine. They're different combinations of the three spaceships that formed together to make these guys. This guy's named Poseidon. He's optimized for underwater missions. Poseidon's great, because look at this. Poseidon has these air puff activated missile launchers on his back. So if we press this, it's going to shoot right up in the air. You ready? 1, 2, 3. There he goes. Whoa. It's the only toy the only Jumbo toy that has that feature that I know of. He's also cool because look at this. Look at this. His legs fold up to make him just as tall as the other guys. But when the going gets tough, these little tank treads fold down and he can drive around on the ground. You can see he's got little wheels on the bottom here, but they're supposed to be tank treads in the show. This guy's name is Get a Dragon, and he's supposed to be the guy who flies around in the air on the TV show. So he's got this kind of wing-shaped thing on the back here. His signature weapon are these spinning blades of destruction on his forearms. And he's got this really interesting head. It's kind of like a Statue of Liberty sort of thing going on in bright red. In the show, the pilot is actually sitting right in there. That's supposed to be a window. He'd be right in there. And this is the third aspect of the same robot. When they need to fight on the ground, on land, they form into this combination. He's called Get a Liger. Liger. Lion, tiger, I don't know. But anyway, he's got this beautiful flower-shaped missile launcher on his fist, which fortunately for you is not loaded because it would take your eye out if it was right there. This guy's name is Trider G7, and he's called that because in the TV series, he transforms into 7 different combinations. This is one of them, the giant robot mode. He's particularly large, but he's got this really distinctive all black coloration with just some red highlights. Now, one of the things that really attracted me to these toys as a kid are the little design elements that you see on here. Red is a really common color for them. And also you often see these symbols, emblems on here. What do they mean? I didn't know as a kid. I just appreciated it for the way it looked. And as you can see, this guy's got a head that's almost reminiscent of a sort of, a lot of these are Japanese, but this one almost feels like American Indian or something. It's a very different sort of aesthetic from the other robots. The helmet here has these fins that are very evocative of a Japanese samurai helmet. And that's something you see a lot in these toys. They're based on traditional warriors, samurai, Incans, Aztecs, traditional warrior cultures where you see this sort of design elements going on. This guy is named Zaku, and he's the bad guy from an animated series called Mobile Suit Gundam. Now, Mobile Suit Gundam first aired in Japan in 1979 as an animated series, and it basically changed the face of Japanese animation. Even today, it's one of the most popular Japanese animated shows in existence. It basically made it cool for adults and teenagers to like giant robots because the plot was aimed at a much older audience than the general giant robot TV show. All of these other ones were aimed at little kids, sometimes really little kids, but this show was aimed at young adults, and even today remains popular. And you can see he's got quite a different design aesthetic from the other robots. The weapon he's holding here, this bazooka, is very realistic looking. He's supposed to look like a walking tank or other weapon. In the show, the pilot sits right here in the chest and drives him around. They use him for fighting in space and in all sorts of places. Check it out if you get a chance. Now this guy here is named God Sigma. He's really interesting because he's got this asymmetrical color combination here. His feet are yellow and blue. Now, a lot of times, robots are designed to have a very symmetrical color scheme. They're supposed to look mechanical. They're supposed to look like they walked out of a factory. But this guy has a very different sort of feel. In the show, his legs and his torso actually decouple from one another and turn into their own individual robots. Now, on these big plastic jumbo Machinder toys, you don't have those kind of complicated mechanisms because the sales point was just how big they were, their physical size. So if you got a smaller version of this toy back in the 80s when the show aired, it might transform into a different form. But this guy, his main thing is that he's just big. It's sheer presence. Once again, if you look at the helmet here, his head, very evocative of kind of a samurai motif. These horns here, designed to look very sharp and very strong. And his expression, there's no face really, just this kind of face plate. So it gives him this sort of menacing look that was really attractive, I think, to a lot of kids at the time. The main thing is strength. It's all about strength. This is Machinder Z, who we talked about a little earlier. As you can see here, Machinder's got a detachable wing that fits on his back with these jet engines here. Now this guy's name is God Mars. Now God Mars first came out in 1981. It was an animated series. And in the show, his arms, body, and legs all transformed into different little robots that would all fight on their own. And then when the going got rough, they would combine into this big guy and take down the bad guy together. It's all about teamwork. It's kind of like the Power Rangers that way, which is a show you might be familiar with because it's been on in America before. But at any rate, you can see that's why each one of his limbs has a different color, because basically each part of his body has its own personality. And really, personality is what these toys are all about. Each one looks different. Each one has its own charm points. Some of them look stronger. Some of them look a little bit more animalistic. This guy is another samurai-looking kind of guy, as you can see from these horns on his head. And this is one of my personal favorites. The reason I like this guy is because you have a sort of traditional combination of this sort of samurai motif here, a traditional design element, with something like this. This is like a giant fan blade on here. So you have this combination of old and new, a fusion of past and present, and that's one of the things that I think really makes these very interesting, not only as toys, but as art objects. This, as you can see, is a very different sort of jumbo Machinder, because it's not a robot at all. It's actually a dragon. And if you look at his face, very evocative of the Asian sort of dragons you might see at a Chinese New Year's celebration or other sort of festival like that. Once again, you have this combination of traditional Asian elements with what's obviously a high-tech and modern aesthetic. That sort of design is what the Japanese really excel at, and this is one of the reasons that I became interested in these toys in the first place. Now this guy also has a little trick up his sleeve. There's a little button on his back right here that says push in Japanese. Now if you push it, this flips up, and inside there's a little handle. You can put this handle here, it actually threads through like this. And if you're a little kid, a really little kid, you can sit on this and ride him around. Not recommended if you weigh over about 30 pounds, but fun if you're a little kid. Also, he's got this great accordion-like neck. Look at this kind of accordion-like material here. This use of different types of materials and colors and design styles is really typical of these Jumbo Machinder toys, and something that I think not only I, but the collectors of these toys really love.